Hey guys, Dark Humility here. You can always catch me at www.twitch.tv /darkhumility 6 to 7 days a week of Diablo 2 content of all kinds, all manners of builds and all manners of challenges and all manners of things. We'll be playing D2R September 23rd, of course, when it launches, which is 8 a.m. PST, if you don't already know. Hardcore push with my stream, with the community. It's going to be awesome stuff. Today, though, we are on our Hardcore Solo Self-Found Live Season 3 Project Diablo 2 journey with a special build guide. Special edition. We haven't made many build guides this season, but today we will be doing a build guide for the Jabazon Uber Killer. Arguably, this might be one of the most cheap, effective builds for killing the Ubers that is reliable. Yeah, you're not likely to die. Since it's solo self-found, I found all this stuff. I wasn't trading. I mean it's not super hard to put together, and it does a ton of damage. And arguably, it's just as reliable as the Zealer. Maybe the Zealer can get more of a high-end damage with better gear, but the kinds of gear you need for this is not tough to acquire. So without further ado, let's look into a Jabazon. The Jabazon is OP. Remember, this build is capable to clear hardcore as well, so it's very, very safe in hardcore. It's capable of clearing those hardcore Ubers. So let's check it out. First, let's go over the stats. We have a pretty decent amount of strength, but we have just enough strength here to wear all of our gear. Of course, if I take off the T-Gods, we use this most of the time for killing the mini Ubers, so we have higher damage reduction. And we have just one over strength over what we can use to wear the Thunder Gods, so we're actually spec'd slightly off there, but in general, you want enough strength to wear your gear. Dexterity, you want enough dexterity to hit maximum block. You also want a lot of attack rating on this build because you're going to be killing the Ubers. It definitely helps to have north of at least like 13,000, 12,000 attack rating against Ubers. We have that so long as we use our Demon Limb, which is right here. So we do have that set up, and we can get all the attack rating in the universe. And with the Mercenary as well, we also get even more attack rating, and we end up hitting around like 18,000 as long as the Mercenary stays alive. If not, still around like 15,000, 14,000, so it's perfectly fine. Alright, Vitality. Put the rest into Vitality and down into Energy. Now, against the mini Ubers, all you really need is max res. Against the big Ubers, though, the major Uber bosses, if you want to be extra safe on hardcore, you need a ton of stacked resistances. As a matter of fact, if you stack your resistances 70 higher, 70, 75 higher, than the max res, then Bale's lower resistance won't affect you, and Bale does a ton of damage in Season 3. So in Season 3, he is buffed out the yin-yang. Another thing about Season 3 Ubers is that you can't escape them anymore, which is why you're going to want to fill your inventory and everything else with potions and juice and whatnot. But anyway, that's good stuff. Lightning res isn't quite as important as stack 75 over, but for Mephisto's Conviction Aura and all his mages and whatnot, having at least 50 over on all of those is helpful for him. For Bale, especially with the cold res, having like 75 stacked cold res is really good because he does a ton of damage with his cold attacks. It's kind of nutty. And of course, poison res, you can still just have 75, but we have so many all res GCs that it's just overstacked for no reason. And then, of course, we have damage reduction. You want a ton of damage reduction. That's going kind of crazy. You want a ton of damage reduction. Damage reduction is a really important stat. So having somewhere between, I would say, for hardcore, just use softcore for reliable survivability. I would at least want north of like 25-30% damage reduction at all times, if possible. At least north of 25%, which we will have even when we put on T-Gods, we'll have 26%, so that's pretty good. Because their physical attacks can hit really hard. I recommend having like around 40 plus, especially for like Matron's Den for those mini Ubers. We're going to do a mini Uber demo, of course, and we're going to do a big Uber demo, but first we're kind of explaining the stats. We're going to go over the skills and then the gear and whatnot of a Jabazon and show her in action to show how ridiculous this build really is. I made the Zealer guide last season. Like I said, I think this is even cheaper and just as effective, so it's really strong. Anyway, rest of it not super important. Hit recovery, recommend just having, you know, honestly it's not super important because you have max block, but I don't know. Having just some hit recovery is nice, but I wouldn't go too ham on it unless you can afford it in your charms. Once again, you're mostly relying on your block frames and not your FHR for this build. And as for attack speed, you're going to want a lot of attack speed. However, with Fanaticism or our Mercenary, we hit really high attack speed even without tons of attack speed. We can hit even higher, though, if we were able to get like maybe some more like a all-res attack speed GC, but we don't have enough of them on my solo self-found, so we're hitting currently 50 attack speed on top of Fanaticism. If you can get even more, though, it'd be nice, because even without Fanaticism, you could have even higher attack speed frames. Recommend consulting the attack speed calculator for that, though. Just try to get as much attack speed as possible, though. And then at least you can even hit max frame potentially, but it's probably pretty challenging. You'd have to have some really good jewels. Faster run walk is always good, not required. Block rate is pretty nice on this build, especially when you're blocking most of the time. So having some source of block rate is also very good on this build. And then Deadly Strike adds on top of your critical strike from your skills. Crushing Blow is really good for getting those monsters down to that 65% health. Crushing Blow doesn't work past 65% of monsters' maximum life anymore in Project Diablo 2. So Crushing Blow is not insanely important, but at least having some Crushing Blow makes that first chunks them down really fast, so that when you get to that 65% level, you can finish them off a lot faster. And then having some source of life leech and mana leech is good. Definitely at least having some of each, the more the better. And open wounds is definitely something I'd highly recommend. It's pretty much required, either that or prevent monster heal for the mini Ubers, which can still regen. The big Ubers can no longer regen though, so at least that's my understanding. So you don't necessarily need open wounds for the big Ubers, the Uber Tristram, but the mini Ubers is definitely good. And then of course we have the critical strike from our skills, which it's not additive, but it will roll for this first and then it'll roll for this, and they both grant double damage. So there's a pretty high chance we do double damage every hit we do. And Magic Find is not important for killing Ubers. All right. And then skills. Let's go into skills. So we got... I like having some distractions just in case, so I put 1 point into Valkyrie and Decoy. One thing to note, though, is that on a Jabazon, in general, you need to put a lot of points elsewhere, so I wouldn't worry about maxing these out too much. And I just worry about just having maybe a distraction. These will die in pretty much one shot in all scenarios with Ubers anyway. It's just something that you can maybe divert their attention or get them off your mercenary, maybe something like that. I don't use them too often on this character, but they're good for like absorbing damage, like in those mini Uber areas that are pretty dangerous, and preventing some death, especially if your gear isn't quite as good as mine. And then you want to put a lot of points into dodge and evade. Not necessarily evade so much, but you're gonna, when you attack, dodge is the really good one, because this is the one that basically just gives you a free ability to completely negate damage 32% of the time. If I level up one more time on her, I can get 33% of the time. But 32% of the time, literally just straight up negate damage. And that's from all sources, mind you. That's from all sources. Whenever I'm attacking or standing still, which is what you're doing most of the time on this character, that's just pretty huge. And of course, when you're running through corridors like in Like in Matron's Den, having some extra points into evade can also be useful. But yeah, it's pretty big. And with max block on top of that, she doesn't take much damage most of the time. The strength of Izual is that not she, he avoids getting hit because he has so much defense. This character avoids getting hit because she has so much block. She has so much just free damage negation. She doesn't even enter a dodge animation in Project Diablo 2, so it's just free damage negation. That just makes it really hard for them to hit her for the same reason. So it's kind of very similar to Izual overall once you add up all the defensive stats. A max critical strike, because this is a chance to do double damage. That's 71% chance to do double damage. That's not a joke. And then even if that 71% doesn't go through, there's also that 37% deadly strike as a backup as well. So yeah, there's a very good chance that we do double damage. So it's definitely like over 80% overall. And most of those hits are hitting really hard. Even compared to this damage that you see on my screen here, which is currently not buffed by anything. If you look at Mercenary here, Mercenary auras buff it up even more, and then Demon Limb would buff it up even more. And as you can see, the attack rating also gets buffed up to insane levels. It's pretty good stuff. I also put 1 point into Penetrate because it's just free AR. But you can put more points like I did if you have some spare points. Having extra attack rating is not a bad idea against Ubers. I wouldn't go too crazy on it, but because of diminishing returns, but having somewhere, like I said, north of like 12,000 at all times, even if you lose your Mercenary when you're killing Ubers, is very helpful. There's no guarantee your Mercenary stays alive. You can put on certain items on her that will increase the odds, but there's no guarantee, so make sure to keep that in mind. Alright, and then of course we have... Yes, we will be doing so very soon. We're doing a demos. Alright, so then we got Javelin, Spear Mastery, and Fend. So you want to max these. These are the key to the build right here. So these are all the passives. The passives was pretty complicated stuff. Honestly, you don't need Pierce at all, so it's just like max this out, maybe put your extra points into here, and then put the rest of the points here. And then you just max these out. Javelin, Spear Mastery, and Fend. All these are maxed out. And Jab is going to be your main ability. You're going to be using pretty much Jab exclusively. Fend is a lot slower in comparison, even though it does a ton of damage. Fend can hit everything around you. Sometimes you might want to use that if you're completely surrounded. But for the most part, you're just going to be using this. And Fend is a synergy. And this just straight up adds more critical strike. So, yeah, it's just a lot of chance to do double damage. Lot of chance to do double damage. This is another source right here, so in addition to the deadly strike we have on our gear, so that's another thing that's it's not even counting. So we just have so much deadly strike chance. It might even be close to like 90% to do deadly strike. I'm not sure. You guys do the math. All right. Anyway, that's it for the skills, and now for the gear. So Mercenary is an Act 1 Mercenary fire arrow. So, as you can see, she makes me run really fast because the Fire Arrow Act 1 Mercenary in Project Diablo 2 gives us bigger aura. Running fast is really good, especially when you don't have block penalties by running in PD2. So you still have max block when you're running. So this is really good for killing many Ubers and just slamming through an area and whatnot. You don't need meditation as well because you have mana leech and whatnot. So you don't need the other Act 1 Mercenary. But running fast is good. That's going to be good stuff. But anyway, so what we got here is now the gear. So this stuff, I recommend an Act 1 Mercenary for a few reasons. One, it gives you vigor aura. But two, she doesn't die to the Ubers most of the time. Because most of the time the Ubers will focus the Mercenary. Most of the time. It's really hard to get the Mercenary in a position where the Uber is not focusing the Mercenary. You can get them to re-aggro you using a couple of different methods, but it's tough. If you use an Act 5 Mercenary, they're likely just to get wrecked by the Ubers. This one actually survives most of the time, killing mini Ubers, and you can probably see that when we actually run the mini Ubers. It's tough when there's a lot of other monsters around, but if there's just the mini Ubers, or just the Ubers themselves, You can pop the mercenary, and she doesn't get hit too often because she's far back. So if we want these auras to increase her damage, I actually recommend the Act 1 mercenary, but there's also other ways to do it. I mean, you can try to run Act 5 with Might Aura and Beast, but it's tougher. Alright, anyway. So in general, Fanaticism Aura, the way to get that on an Act 1 mercenary is a Faith Bow. The way to get Might Aura on an Act 1 mercenary is a Templars. We got insanely lucky on this. This is, once again, still a self-found, so that is a crazy item. It's very tough to get an Act 1 mercenary to wear one of these. You either have to put a lot of items that grant strength on the mercenary, or you need Hell Runes, because it requires such an insane amount of strength. So you do need that negative requirement reduction on it. Talrosh's helm here is pretty beastly stuff, though. It got physical damage reduction on it, so it's got a lot of res, it's got a leech, it's got a life. Definitely a lot of really good defensive stats. Of course, you can also put a Vampire Gaze for more DR on the Mercenary. You can put an Andes if you're struggling to have enough strength to wear Templars. Whatever you really want to do. One thing to note is that the Mercenary doesn't always stay alive, and that's fine, because even against the big Ubers or against Uber Tristram, we can still destroy them, even without the Mercenary. So don't feel like you have to have this crazy level of gear to do it, which is why I was saying this is an overall cheaper build. You don't need it. It does make it insane, and does make you insanely strong, but you don't need it. That's one thing I have to emphasize here. Emphasize. Rax. Attack speed, life leech, open wounds. Alright, nice. Honestly, another thing you can use for like Uber Tristram would be Hellmouth. You can give her some Fire Sorb, and maybe, just maybe, she might survive Diablo, which I don't think I'm going to do in this case, but you can do it if you want. I have one of those, though. T-God is really good for surviving Uber Mephisto. Stacking her res 50 plus, by the way. It's not quite 50 plus stack, but if you get it pretty high, she's not going to have low res even with Mephisto's Conviction Aura, and that'll also help her survive against Mephisto's Conviction. If you get like better rolls on things, you can get more res, and you can stack her res up 50 plus, and then you can get like her Sorb, and then she's going to survive a lot easier. Thunder God's Vigor has the best chance of surviving against his lightning attack, and it also just helps in general against lightning attacks, even from Diablo as well. She actually tends to survive some of that stuff. And then, of course, cannot be frozen, so she doesn't get stuck and frozen and then dies because she gets stuck and left behind. So that's good stuff. And, of course, additional res on top of that. For our gear, this is the most important part. So, this is what I mean by you don't necessarily need the craziest stuff, but some things that are going to help out are any kind of weapon that does a lot of damage. The cheapest weapon for this build is probably True Silver, because True Silver has Crushing Blow, it has attack speed, and it has enhanced damage. You can double up it as well and get decent weapon damage on it. If you get an F one of those, it's actually an ideal weapon. What we have here, though, is something I found myself, of course, under Solo Self-Found. We have a Crushing Blow Corrupted Crushing Blow Corrupted F Thunderstrokes. That does a lot of damage too. So there's the F True Silver, which arguably maybe even can exceed this damage, and it has more attack speed. But the key is having attack speed, the key is having a lot of damage, and the key is having maybe some Crushing Blow or just a lot of damage modifiers on your F Javelin. It can be a crafted Javelin as well. The key is just having a strong, high damage Javelin. That's it. It can be any of them. It can be any of the ones you can possibly think of. And it doesn't have to be a death. It doesn't require a crazy runeward base. I know out there everyone's trying to make a Zealer and whatnot to do Ubers on PD2. You don't need it. Why? Because this build is a thing. This is... yeah, you don't need a 5-socketed F Berserker Axe. You don't need some crazy bases. You don't even need a runeward. All you need is some kind of strong Javelin. So, more damage. There's a lot of ways to get this strong Javelin. There's a lot of options. Like I said, it's just attack speed, damage modifiers like Crushing Blow, Deadly Strike. Those are all the keys to success on these suckers. And of course, Ethereal is going to make it even better. So I'm playing hardcore, of course, but even if you weren't, if you want to survive a bit more reliably against Ubers, PDR is important. That being said, if you want to be a little bit riskier, or if you want to get more res on your armor as well, you can use Fortitude. Fortitude doesn't have 20% to 30% physical damage reduction. It has 200% enhanced damage though, and it can greatly increase your damage. You can also use Chains of Honor, which is even more expensive. Chains of Honor gives you 65 all res, and it gives you gives you demon damage and undead amp damage, which can also help against the Ubers. So I would recommend Chains of Honor, Fortitude, or Shaft Stop on this character. In this case, I'm using Shaft Stop. This is basically my main source of physical damage reduction, and it's very important that I don't take insane hits. I put a attack speed all res jewel in it as well, by the way, just to increase my attack speed even more. But wait, there's more. That's right. Steel Shade. So this is actually essential on this build, and I'll explain why very shortly. This is essential, so you have to have a Steel Shade. It doesn't have to have 2 skills necessarily, but it does have to be a Steel Shade. Having max fire as corruption is really convenient, especially against like Diablo and whatnot. Given that this helm already has Fire Sword. Because of this helm, I don't actually have to wear like Hellmouth or any other source of Fire Sword to deal with Diablo. But the main key to this is the block rate and increased chance of blocking. We need it somewhere on this build. We absolutely need it. We need it somewhere, and we need it good. It's arguable you could put on like Guardian Angel down here instead and get that increased chance of blocking stat, and then you can use like, I don't know, Crown of Ages or Vampire Gaze up here. You could do that too. The only problem with that approach though is that you're not likely to get as high of PDR. I mean, my Shaft Stop rolled crap, but if you actually get a better one, it's usually going to be better to do this way instead of the other way, because unless you also have enough res to increase your res with Guardian Angel as well. But you could do a Guardian Angel, and then you can go like Vampire Gaze. But for the most part, I would say if you want your damage reduction, and whatnot, and you want your high damage, or you want your high damage reduction, then you're gonna need to wear Steel Shade on top of this. You need that chance of blocking. The reason why you need this chance of blocking is this. Alright, so this thing, 3 sockets is ideal, of course. If you get a 3 socket Hunter's Glory, this is the ideal shield for this build, period. Unless you're running a 2-handed spear, which you can 100% do, you can destroy the Ubers with a 2-handed spear with jab. In softcore, that's a lot better. I'd say in hardcore, it's insanely risky. If you get put in hit recovery before you can start hitting things, you can just straight up die. And you can just straight up die by taking too much damage from Hell Temptresses, like in Matron's Den. You can just get wrecked because you get hit by too many of those magical balls that they chuck at you, those succubi, and you can just straight up die. You can just get stacked and die. If you don't have block, this is a very dangerous build. I mean, you can definitely run it with a 2-handed spear for normal Ubers, but it's pretty dangerous. If you're not doing that though, and you don't have that kind of crazy damage on a 2-handed spear, this is 100% the way to go with a 1-handed weapon. It's got amplified damage on attack. So this is the Exile equivalent. This is why I said it's kind of like the cheaper Zealer. This is the Exile equivalent of on a Jabazon. This is Exile, basically. Exile has amplified damage as well. Also on attacking. I think it might be on striking. Not 100% sure if there's a difference, but it's pretty similar. So in this case, we rolled something really cruddy on the corruption, but I mean, if you get a really good corruption on top of it, it can be even better. Runes and Eld runes will help you get that block chance up. Block chance is a struggle on this shield. It just is. It starts at 45% chance to block. It's really bad. Getting max block is really hard on this shield, which is why you need some kind of block source. So Guardian Angel or Steel Shade. I recommend the Steel Shade, but I honestly think it's required if you want a strong armor. But you don't need the max res from Guardian Angel for Ubers anyway. So this is probably the way to go. And you got like all res. You got attack rating, You got a lot of other good stats on this sucker too, including faster run walk. So it's really good. It's allowing us to run really fast. A lot of people probably been sleeping on the shield, to be honest, but it's insane for this build. You need that amplify damage because you need that negative enemy physical res. That is like one of the most important stats on an Uber killer in PD2 for any kind of physical damage Uber killer. That enemy negative physical res is provided by the amplify damage. It's also provided by the CTA forward to battle cry. So you can see me doing that here. And that's what we're going to be using against the Uber bosses as well. So we're going to drop their enemy physical res by 14%, as you can see right here. Actually, it looks like we're at 15% in this case, so we're negative 15%. We got negative 15% here. And then this is another, I think, negative 15%. That's good stuff. Uber bosses have a lot of physical resistance, so this is how we get that damage in. High Lord's Wrath. So we need attack speed still. Once again, attack speed's a pretty big focus. Since we have our source of amplify damage, and it's higher than Atma's. Atma's would only be 7% chance to cast amplify damage, so it's not very reliable. You could go Atma's, but then you don't have the extra deadly strike, you don't have the extra res, and you don't have the attack speed. We got a nice corruption on this, actually, so it's nice. Also, we get a skill off this, so I'd recommend the High Lords because of the attack speed and everything else, and it makes it pretty easy to the amplify damage strikes. It's really good. It's just really good stats for this character. Once again, this CTA is pretty cruddy except for the battle cry roll, which is max. So battle cry is arguably the most important role though for killing Ubers. So it's all about getting that negative physical res down. The other two rolls are just kind of whatever. Battle command would also increase your damage a bit, obviously, and then you could also get a bit more life and mana with battle orders. And of course, we have a +2 Lidless Wall to increase the power of our Call to Arms and our battle orders and battle cry and everything else. Alright. Gore Riders. Gore Riders 16 cold res. Very sick. I pretty much always recommend Gore Riders because this will give you the open wounds for mini Ubers. It's our only source of open wounds except on the Mercenary who's wearing Drax currently. And also it's giving us Crushing Blow, and it's giving us Deadly Strike, once again. You don't need MF, so War Traps, you could use War Traps, but I don't think it's going to be as effective against Ubers as Gore Riders. I'm pretty sure Gore Riders is just best in slot, period. Goblin Toads can also help out with more Crushing Blow, but it doesn't have the other stats. Soul Drainers. Soul Drainers, there is a bit of a debate, in the community, and there's a lot of people that definitely like Laying of Hands. I've tried Laying of Hands, and Laying of Hands can be good for attack speed, so that's actually one of the big bonuses of it. And it also has demon damage. But it doesn't have leech. It doesn't have negative monster defense per hit, so it might be a little bit harder to hit with it sometimes. And it doesn't have the big one, which is the negative enemy physical resistance, which is really the way you really need to get that the Uber's negative physical res down. You have to get it down as far as possible to do a lot of damage to them. Yeah, have I tried to use Laying of Hands? I tried, but you could use Laying of Hands. Laying of Hands felt like it could be better in some situations, and it's arguable that if you lose attack speed in the or you're lacking attack speed, that's definitely the way to go. I don't know. I tend to prefer this, but that's just because I also like. You also need the life leech, so you also need you do want some sources of life leech on your gear if at all possible, to make it to where when you do get their resistances broken, that you're sustaining and you don't have to constantly use potions. So yeah, it is a bit of a debate there, but I think both gloves are both insanely good for this purpose. I would use one of the two. Bulk Hathos Set Ring. I got a really good corruption on this. Like I was saying, you need that life leech. And we're getting physical damage reduction on this, which is the most important stat. We're also getting attack rating, and we're getting light res, and of course we're also getting enhanced damage. It's pretty much everything you would want against the Ubers, so that's a sick BK set ring right there. You could also use dual leech rings with AR. You could use all kinds of things, crafted rings with AR in this slot. You could even use a BK ring, whatever you could think you can stomach, but if you don't have a lot of physical damage reduction, this is a good way to do it for sure. And I'm kind of struggling with it on this build, mostly because my shaft stop rolled really low, so. Gotta keep that in there. And then we have Ravenfrost with attack rating. So that's a nice corruption, right? That's a good Ravenfrost. Just whatever Ravenfrost you can really stomach. You need that cannot be frozen. You can also get the cannot be frozen elsewhere though, and you don't necessarily have to use Ravenfrost. So you can get the cannot be frozen corruption on like boots, for instance. Since this is solo self-found though, I haven't really found a better source of cannot be frozen for this particular build. And also it gives me a ton of attack rating just off of the dex, and the attack rating gives me all that block chance, so I really can't complain about Ravenfrost. There's definitely a lot of options for rings though, just a lot of melee rings that can definitely give you a lot of nice melee stats. As for the belt, for Uber Mephisto and Uber Diablo, you're going to want to use T-Gods. Right now though, for mini Ubers and for Bale, you're going to want to have Verdungos. You want as much PDR as possible, especially for those mini Uber areas like Matron's Den and Furnace of Pain, and of course the Forgotten Sands. You really want that physical damage reduction. That's going to save your life. And you can also use String of Ears, of course, so I recommend String of Ears over Dungas. String of Ears also gives Life Leech. This gives FHR, and it gives a lot of Vitality, which scales really well on an Amazon, because Amazons get 3 life per Vitality point. And then, of course, you know, we're kind of just stacked with Juves and Potions. Like I said, you can't leave the big Ubers when you go in there, so we want to make sure we're stacked with Potions. We use the Demon Limb to pre-buff attack rating and some fire damage. It gives us Enchant, and it regens, so it's free. We don't have to worry about repairing it anymore on PD2 in Season 3, so it's good to go. As for Charms, ideally you would have a torch already. I didn't have this torch when I did my first kill, though, which is fine. But res, as good of a torch as you possibly can get. This is as good as it gets for me currently. Res and life. Lots of res, lots of life, especially on hardcore. You don't want to get one shot. You don't want to die. You need to stack that res. I explained everything about stacking res earlier, and how stacking res against Bale, specifically cold res, and stacking all of the elements at least 50 or higher against Mephisto for the Conviction Aura, particularly the Lightning res. It's going to be essential, and also you're going to need that Lightning Sword as well, because Mephisto does so much damage that even if you have stacked Lightning res, and you have a lot of stacked Lightning res, he can still one-shot you even without the Lightning Sword. So, it's just the way it is. So we got a lot of that. You can also put attack rating on here, as you can see. So you can put attack rating, life. I have some attack rating and life as well. It can do damage, AR, life. You can definitely do that as long as your res is set up. Make sure your res is stacked first. That is the priority. Alright. Without further ado, it's time for testing. So, let's go into it. This is the easiest one. We're just going to do a demo here. So we're going to demo this. I didn't plan for it to be the easiest one, but it's a good way to see how strong she is, though. You can see that she is not a joke whatsoever. So, let's do it. Of course, you can always cast your decoy ahead of you to get ahead of the game. I know! Nicely organized charms. You know you can blame for that? I know exactly you can blame for that. Look how much damage she does, and you can see how easy it is for us to proc amp. Look how readily the amp procs. It is insane. One thing to note is that even on our swap, we have stacked res that is stacked as well. And we even have 67% block, somewhere between 71 to 67. And 72 or 71 with the T-Gods. But look how ridiculously fast we kill him. As you can see, I casted this battle cry, as you can see on him, and as you can see I'm blocking, and then of course once I start hitting him I proc amp, and that's all that negative physical res is just chewing through him, and he dies really fast. And as you can see we're pretty safe and we're pretty secure. And look, he even dropped what he's supposed to drop, so each of the mini Ubers have a 33% chance to drop one of these, which is a brain. Once again, not rigged, not planned at all. Of course, sometimes you have to go deeper into these areas. It's RNG where they're located, so you just have to go find them. But anyway, as you can see, she is a monster and she kills them insanely fast. Alright, and with that, let's go swap out our gear a little bit here. And let's go get ready for big Ubers. So, we already were stacked for big Ubers. You don't necessarily have to stack res as hard for the mini Ubers, but matter of fact, you can prioritize other stats for them. But in this case, I just was lazy and just kept on all my res so that we can easily transition into the big Uber fight. So now we're going to be doing Uber Tristram. Uber Tristram is a bit tougher, and it's good stuff in general. Alright, so Uber Tristram, especially on hardcore, but even on softcore, so you don't die. If you die, you will not get a torch because you can't re-enter the area by any means. So this is why it's important to be pretty tanky, and this is one of the reasons why having a two-handed spear can be very risky. Doesn't matter what you're doing, especially for the mini Uber areas, but for the big Ubers it also can be quite risky for the same reason. I'd say a two-handed spear, though, would be more effective for at least Uber Tristram, if I had to say. If that was the goal. Alright!
Good evening.
Izual is down. He gave us the brain, and now... One thing you can also do before Ubers, since it's the guide, I can kind of show you guys. You can check areas in Act 1 and elsewhere for shrines. You can bring in shrines for a very limited amount of time. You can bring them in to like boost your life as well, from like a skill shrine, for instance. You definitely don't need them though. Definitely don't need them. You're not gonna have them active all the time anyway. So if you want to just like make it a little bit easier though, you can find some shrines if you want. Hey, we got a raid! Let's go! Chat, spam those eyes of Xana in the chat for Just Kylie launching a Xana attack on stream. Let's go! Let's get it. Just in time, people. So one of the main challenges is going to be keeping our mercenary alive in the big Uber area, for sure. We might not successfully do it. I've kept her alive for an entire session once, though, so it's possible. You don't need to, though. See, she's built to where she's fully independent of the mercenary. She does not have to have the mercenary, but it will end up taking longer. It will end up draining more potions, so we'll keep that in mind. What did you do? What's up, man? How you doing? Oh, no, not your bad at all. Hope you're having a great time. Alright, anyway, we didn't really find much in terms of shrines, but if you wanted to look around, you definitely could. I'm not going to waste too much time doing it, especially for the purpose of the video. So let's go into it, and you got to right-click the Pandemonium Talisman without any other windows open in your inventory. Round the Bloodbath, and you have to cube up the organs using a key, so when you find the organs, you put a key in, and bam. And then, of course, you need 3 of each key to open up an Uber portal. And if you open up 3 in the game, you'll get all 3 rifts. Of course, avoiding Andy is always a good idea, because Matron's Den is pretty tough, it's dangerous. But anyway. So as you can see, we got res stacked up the yin-yang. And we got Dab Suckers. Got that one. Alright, so we used our Demon Limb, we enchanted with it. We can of course spawn our Valkyrie if we want, and then we can even lead them around with decoys, so we kind of want to separate them. That's going to be the key here, and we always want to separate them no matter what. So it doesn't matter what Uber killer you use, but you always want to separate them. 110%. Alright. Alright, so Uber Mephisto, wow, that's a weird location. Normally he's not over there, but that's okay. Can lead him along a bit. Let's try to get away from Bale. We definitely don't want to get lower resisted and conviction at the same time, because we are not stacked for that. And most of the time you're not going to be. Alright, so I just procced our battle cry on him by swapping to our CTA. And then he's gonna hit pretty hard, just make sure he doesn't crit you, so... That wasn't even a crit. Most of the time, it's gonna be perfectly fine, but make sure your mana stays up as well.
I can already tell that I'll be your best
And as
friend.
you can see, our res is still maxed against Mephisto. You can see that screen there. That is exactly what we want. We don't want to drop our res for Mephisto. Now, I could swap back and then battlecry him again. I'm actually going to avoid that. Because it might just be easier to do that. And that's what it was. It was easier to do. It's just easier to kill him in one go. I killed him at the end with just amplify damage, so we didn't have the battle cry stacked on top of the amplify damage. And we even got lucky and got a black soulstone, and that's never guaranteed from him, so that's kind of cool. And I was also healing my mercenary by shift clicking the potions. So if you shift and press 1 or 2 or 3, in my case, because that's where my juves are, I can give one to Megan. Megan, of course, survived that, but just because we were giving her potions, so that's good. It's good to have the mercenary survive Mephisto. You usually want to do Mephisto first unless he's trapped in a house, because that's always a pain in the arse. If he's trapped in the house, you can kill the other ones first, and then you can try to lead him out of the house by using decoys and killing monsters in front of him, but it's usually a pain. Don't try to kill him in the house. I don't recommend it, because he'll spawn tons and tons of monsters, and he will surround you with them, and that's pretty dangerous. So it can be very dangerous, especially if you run out of juice or whatever. So you don't want to do that. Alright, so we killed one of them. We have to kill all 3 to get our Hellfire Torches. Is the whole reason you get all those keys, you kill all those key bosses, you get all those organs. You have to have at least 3 organs of any kind. You make the Pandemonium Talisman, you get in here, and you do it. Alright, so next up, let's try to clear out these enemies here. We can go to Diablo. Diablo's not a bad idea. We can try to get Diablo over here. Diablo is... Since we're wearing our T-Gods is definitely the key for Mephisto and Diablo. Diablo does a lightning hose, which also does a billion lightning damage. So having that lightning sword is good. And then of course the fire sword is going to be, and the max fire res in my case, is going to really help us out with his fire damage. And he does a ton of fire damage. It's mostly what his damage is fire damage. Fire damage, and also definitely a hard-hitting lightning hose. So that's good stuff. Of course, you can also wear the Dungos for his lightning hose. PDR also helps for that because it does half physical and half lightning. So the only challenge is getting him to actually come over here. Okay. Alright. And I think we're far enough from Bale to avoid getting lower res, but I'm actually not 100% sure. Once again, we swap for Battlecry. And as you can see, she is a monster. Look how much damage she's doing. This is how fast she's able to attack. It's actually nutty. Make sure to hear that sound effect for the battle cry to know the battle cry also applied to Diablo. And looks like I'm blocking my mercenary perfectly from the firestorm. That's really good positioning. Normally I don't get this kind of positioning, so that's good stuff. It means the mercenary is perfectly safe. And see, we don't need any kind of ethereal, death Zerker axes. We don't need an exile. We don't need expensive bases or expensive runewords. I love the Zealer, don't get me wrong, but I know some people struggle to actually build one of those suckers. And this build is just using an item that, honestly, most people don't probably value very highly. And some other items that usually aren't super expensive because people don't value them highly to begin with. And we're even using a pretty, I wouldn't say an ideal, I'd say a much more ideal weapon would be like an F double up true silver. So as you can see, the damage is pretty insane. Now against Bale, once again, our res is stacked to the moon, especially on cold res to deal with Bale. Bale hits really hard. Alright, so Bale just lower resisted us. This is exactly what we're worried about here. As you can see, my res on my cold res is still 75, but my fire resistance isn't even 75 anymore. So once again, you can kind of see that we got a lot more, we got a little bit more cold res than the fire res, but yeah. The shit hits like a truck. You can see how much damage we're still taking, even when we have max res. Now imagine if all of our res is like lightning res, or even below that, at like 50 or 40. That's what it was like on my strafe zone, and it was really scary. In some ways, him being trapped in the house is actually not that bad of a thing, because he can't move me around with his ice attack, but you don't have to trap him in the house or anything. So, that's good. I put on the Dungos so we have more physical damage reduction. We don't need cold res against him. I mean, don't need lightning res. And GG. Strafezon's still alive, by the way. Strafezon did 2 runs, and then we started going Jabazon, and there you go. There you have it. Here's a Hellfire Torch. That is what they always drop. 1 standard of heroes per person that does it. And your Hellfire Torch. GG. That's it. Are there any other monsters in here? Nah. Okay. So what we're gonna do now is I'm just gonna go on my other character, just gonna go pick this sucker up. You always have 2 minutes to re-enter a game. When you kill the Ubers, it makes a portal, so you can just enter the portal. It'll be good. So I have a character that doesn't have a torch on purpose, so that I can transfer torches. This is my other Zon. See, I have 2 Zons. This is my strafe Zon that I killed the Ubers with the first 2 times. And what is with that tentacle spam in the chat, dude? Chat's crazy sometimes, let me tell you. Stop it! No tentacles. I can't say it enough. Alright, so this is actually the first of 20 torches we're going to get today. We're going to get a lot more later. But let's have everyone, of course, in the chat guess on the torch. 30 to 60 vitality, 10 to 20 all res. And one of the 3 classes, Paladin, Sorceress, Druid, Assassin, Barbarian, Necromancer, or Zon. We have that many organs, that's right. We got 250 key sets. We've done 8 torches so far. This is number 9, actually. So we've done 8 in the previous 2 days. I went so hard on those key sets, it's crazy. So we can actually do a ton of torches today. But this is the first one. Alright, chat, guess it. This is not for YouTube. We're still recording, of course, but sorry, YouTube. If you guys want to see what the torch was, though, I mean, people always like to see what the torch is, so I don't see the problem with that. And let's get it going. Chat, guess on the torch, guess on the torch, get it. So as you can see, it's pretty safe. It's really reliable. All you need is a lot of res. Res charms definitely, but you know, there's more places where you could have put res on my gear if I got like more sockets, if I had different corruptions, if I had different items. So you don't necessarily need all your res and charms, but the charms definitely help. And if you ever want to know how to farm charms, check out my Arcane Power Farm guide. Get rich. Get High Runes guide on how to farm Arcane Sanctuary and my Arcane Sanctuary data video on YouTube, and you will know the most efficient way to farm charms, arguably, in the game, especially without LK Super Chests in Project Diablo 2. Alright, that's how I farm most of these suckers, so yeah, all these charms are still found once again, so it's not like I bought them or anything and just made any of this stuff for the video. I just found it. Definitely way better options than a lot of those I talked about earlier. And now I'm gonna guess for the torch. I want a druid torch. I'm gonna guess 1348 druid torch. All right, here you go. And Link will open the chest. It is a Well, it's a class we don't have, but it's not an amazing roll, to be honest. That's kind of low. Medium all res, and low vitality. All right, 3215 Necromancer Torch. We don't have a Necromancer Torch, so that's actually our very first Necro Torch. It's pretty cool. We've gotten duplicates of like 4 classes in almost every class except for Sorceress, so we're still missing that one. Very cool, very cool. I will take it 100%. And with that, GG chat. This is number 9. Torch number 9, taking it. Let's see if anyone guessed it. I'd say Raposo got pretty close on that Necro Torch guess for sure. Oh, you know who got even closer though? Lucky Luke. That's a really close guess. Man, Lucky Luke almost had that one dialed. Alright. Well, GG. YouTube, chat. Of course, I will be continue streaming chat, but for YouTube, you guys, remember you can always catch me at www.twitch.tv/Dark Humility for 6 to 7 days of Diablo 2 action, and of course, you can see me playing Diablo 2, or Diablo 2 Resurrected when that launches. No problem there whatsoever.
I can already tell that I'll be your best friend in this forsaken camp.
We will be playing hardcore for that. Thank you so much for the follow, Zordag. Thank you so much for the follow, man. Welcome to Cole of Xana. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. You thought it was a nice, fun way to kill Ubers on PD2. I can already tell that
I'll be your best friend in this forsaken
You learned
camp.
also, if you're playing hardcore on PD2, you know, let me know about your exploits, even on softcore as well. Let me know if this build worked for you. Let me know how you got this build going, or if you have other setups that I was not using or didn't mention when I went over my gear. Let me know if there's any like fun ideas and whatnot. But anyway, really fun build, really strong, really effective, really safe, and really reliable. That is the Jabazon, the Jab, hardcore's on, easy mode. Kill those Ubers, get torches, get rich, get organs. Get everything. You can even get keys as well. No problem. Of course, there's probably faster ways with the sorcerers with teleport and whatnot, especially when there's no non-teleport areas in Season 3 now. But yeah, kill it. Smash it. You guys are the best. Best community on Twitch and YouTube. Diablo 2 for life. Let's kill it. Dark Humility. Over and out. Check out the rest of our guides on YouTube and on Maxroll. d2.maxroll.gg. Check out my guides there as well. And let me know what you guys think about this awesome build. See you guys next time.